I'll start with my lowest in the AFC North, which was the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, the Steelers didn't have many picks. They turned them into great players, including Minkah Fitzpatrick with their first-round pick this year. So they didn't have many picks to work with. They had some good picks. I like Chase Claypool. He's definitely an interesting option to look at. Antoine Brooks in the 6th round, I think, was a decent pick for them. Beyond that, I don't know really if they did as well as they could have. I expected them to address more secondary than they did, at least get some depth in that secondary to help out with Joe Hayden and with Minkah, because obviously the rest of their guys have had trouble developing as a whole. Steven Nelson was up and down last year. They had other safeties that were struggling, so we'll see if Brooks can be the guy. I just don't know if they can trust him to do as one. Anthony McFarland's a solid backup running back. I don't know if I would have taken him that early, but solid backup running back. So kind of an average draft. They didn't have much to work with, so I gave him a C. The Browns, I'm going to do next. I gave them a C+. I think they had a lot of kind of boomer bust picks. Really,
terrible draft for the Browns.
I've reiterated many times, I'm not a big Jedrick Wills fan. They took him in the 1st round. I think there were better tackles out there. I know people like him with his speed and his mobility, but his raw strength is not great, and I think for that kind of system, I don't love it. I like the pick of Grant Delpit in the 2nd round. He was my favorite safety coming into this draft. Good coverage guy. He just had trouble with his raw tackling ability, but he also could be a box safety and blitz. He has good speed and coverage ability. I like Jacob Phillips. I think they reached on him a little bit, though, because he didn't play much at LSU. I thought they could have gotten him a lot later, and I think they took him over Zach Baum, which is very interesting. And Donovan Peoples-Jones was a decent pick. But again, they have a lot of boomer bust picks, a lot of reaches for the Browns. Still not bad value, and they fill positional needs. But I think in terms of the positional needs that were available, but I still think they reached a lot in terms of this draft. So I gave the Browns a C+. And then 2 A's for the Bengals and for the Ravens. I think they both did an excellent job in this draft. I'll start with the Bengals. Obviously, they got Joe Burrow. That's the big name. But they also filled out with other good players, too. I think they got 2 nice linebackers with Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither. Good value for both of them. T. Higgins in the 2nd round. He's kind of recovering from injury, so he might take a little while to get it going, but still a nice player, good physical receiver when he's healthy. The only thing that kept the Bengals from getting an A+ is they didn't address enough offensive line. That was the only thing that stopped them from getting an A+. Otherwise, it was a very good draft in terms of value for the Bengals. And for the Ravens, they did a great job, too, with getting their value and filling a lot of needs for them. They got 2 very nice receivers in this draft, and Devin Duvernay at the end of the 3rd round, one of their compensation picks. And they also got a guy I didn't even know that declared, and James Proche, who's a very nice receiver as well. Kind of a bigger-bodied guy, but also versatile to be a slot guy, too, in the 6th round. I thought he was going to stay another year at SMU, but ended up making it work. And then Patrick Queen, what a nice value for them late in the 1st round. They had trouble guarding tight ends last year. Queen is a good man coverage guy and is also a very good outside run stopper as well. And they needed that middle linebacker to help out their defense. And then the rest of their draft, just a lot of good value picks. J.K. Dobbins, another running back to add into that mix. Justin Matabuke, a decent defensive lineman in the 3rd round. And Malik Harrison is a nice pick as well. And then bolster the rest of the offensive line depth. So the Ravens, they get an A as well. I think they really did a phenomenal job with this draft, considering how late they were drafting.
All right, I'm going to go to the Baltimore Ravens first. I love Patrick Queen. Patrick Queen is a guy that could stop tight ends, could play the field. He could also stop wide receivers, certain wide receivers. He's got the speed to play the middle and defend the middle, so I really like Patrick Queen. J.K. Dobbins is another good player, Ohio State Buckeye, another guy that can play very, very well at running back, one of the best running backs in this year's draft. Justin, how do you pronounce his name? Matabuke, defensive tackle for Texas A&M. Another good player, another very high-profile defensive tackle in this year's draft. Very surprised he fell to the 3rd round. I thought he was a 2nd-round draft pick, so I like that pick. So all in all, their picks, and I'm not going to go through all their picks. I graded the Ravens one of the highest on my board. I gave them an A. So I like the Ravens. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's go to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Peter. Oh, you got the Buffalo Bills there. Got it? All right. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they didn't have a lot to draft with. They gave up their 1st-round draft pick for Minkah Fitzpatrick last year, the Miami Dolphins. Minkah Fitzpatrick paid huge dividends in the second half of the season for them, really solidified their secondary. Chase Claypool, who a lot of people thought was a very underrated wide receiver in this year's draft. I was surprised they didn't go after Mims. He fit better with the Ravens because I think the Ravens needed that guy that can go deep and make the plays deep. They don't have that guy anymore. I think they have a lot of guys that can play the slot and run a lot of good routes, but they don't have that guy that can go deep, the speed guy, the long, lengthy guy. So I was very surprised they went after Chase Claypool, but Chase Claypool, very good wide receiver. Like I said, it had a lot of depth. This wide receiving class had one of the most depthful wide. Matter of fact, I think there were 14 wide receivers drafted in the first 2 rounds, which is the most ever in NFL history. Mm-hmm. So it had a lot of depth for wide receivers, and there are going to be a lot of wide receivers in this year's draft. Alex Highsmith, who is another Charlotte native, another guy, edge rusher, very surprised that they got him in the 3rd round. Another guy that a lot of people thought was a 2nd-round draft pick. A good edge rusher, not a great edge rusher. He could do a lot of things besides edge rushing. He could also, he's not bad on at the run too, stopping the run. So I like, all in all, for the amount of picks that they had, and they had 6 picks, I could give Pittsburgh C+, a C+, because they didn't have that many picks, and they had a lot of positions to fill. The Cleveland Browns. Let's go to the Cleveland Browns. Now, Jedrick Wills. Jedrick Wills. I like him. As an offensive lineman, I thought he was the best overall offensive lineman in this year's draft. Now, Speedy didn't like him. I like him. He's got sensational footwork. He's got the longest arms out of every single offensive lineman in this year's draft. And his footwork's very, very good as well. Is he the fastest offensive lineman? Do you really need to be fast as an offensive lineman? Only if you're a good running team. Now, I do believe when I look at the Cleveland Browns, they have a good running team, and they have Chubbs. They still have Kareem Hunt, who they franchised, and they put a tender on him. And if anybody wants it, I think they put a 1st-round tender.
I think it was a 2nd-round tender.
No, it was a 1st-round tender.
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure it was a 1st-round tender. So he's still on the team. So if a team's interested in him, I don't know if they're going to be able to get him, because I don't know if anybody's going to give up a 1st-round, even a 2nd-round draft pick for Kareem Hunt right now with all the background and all the different stuff that he's had on and off the field.
Maybe later in the season if a team becomes desperate for a running back at the trade deadline.
3rd round, Jordan Elliott. I think he was a good value pick. Defensive tackle from Missouri. A guy that can is a good run stopper, can get at the quarterback too. I like him too. So all in all, I gave the Cleveland Browns a C-. I didn't like their draft. Besides their 1st and their 3rd round draft pick, it wasn't the best draft, but they didn't have a lot of picks. So Cleveland, who has had a lot of picks the last couple of years. They had 11 picks last year and 10 picks the year before that. Well, how many picks did they have? 8?
Yeah, they had 8 picks this year. Well, again, most of them they traded now for stars because they're getting stars now. When they were trading with all those picks, they were trying to just accumulate picks to rebuild.
Well, the Wills move I like, but all in all, I didn't like their draft. Cincinnati, great draft. They really did. Joe Burrows, who, if they protect him, and they still have Williams, who's coming, Jonah Williams, who didn't play at all last year because he tore his ACL. He will play this year. Did he tore his ACL or his Achilles?
Tore his ACL.
His ACL. So he's coming back this year. He's a guy that's going to be implemented into the offensive line. This is an offensive line that needs to be reconstructed. And you see with Jonah Williams, he's something that you need to look forward to as far as I'm concerned. I was very surprised that they didn't add any offensive line help in the draft, especially with a quarterback of Joe Burrow's stature. This is a guy that doesn't move good in and out of the pocket. He is a pocket-present quarterback. Some people compare him to Jared Goff. So I'm very surprised they didn't add any offensive line help, especially as much they added a guard in the 6th round, a guy that I've never even heard of. So
well, he's from Kansas football. It's not really a product of great football players.
So I'm very surprised they didn't add any offensive line help, especially how clustered the offensive linemen that were in this draft. But T. Higgins was a guy that was very underrated. A lot of people thought could have been a 1st-round draft pick. A lot of these wide receivers could have been a 1st-round draft pick. He was drafted early in the 1st round, early in the 2nd round. So I was very surprised about that. Logan Wilson, another good linebacker, Wyoming player. He was picked fairly low in this year's draft. I thought he was going to be a late 2nd round, early 3rd round. He fell to 65 for them, so I was very surprised about that as well. So all in all, I gave the Bengals an A. So they had a very good draft as well.
All right, we're going to the South now?
Yes.
All right, so AFC South for me. Some good drafts, some okay ones, but mostly good here in the AFC South. We'll start with the Texans. Texans, obviously, they traded all their picks away, so they don't have many to work with. I gave them a C. I like their 1st pick, their 2nd-round pick in Ross Blacklock. He's a a good defensive tackle that'll definitely help that run defense. They lost DJ Reader. J.J. Watts obviously had trouble staying healthy, so that will help their run defense, which was very good last year. And now they get a nice pick to help them. Jonathan Greenard's a decent pass rusher in the third round, speed rusher that'll end up helping them. And then John Reed, the Penn State corner, I like in the fourth round. I thought they got good value. But again, all in all, they didn't really have much to work with. Nothing that could really fill their big needs, because beyond that, they've had a pretty bad offseason for the most part. The Titans, I gave them a B. I think they had some good draft picks, some reaches. They had a good mixture of everything, but I think when you talk about filling needs, I think they did a nice job with that. I love the pick of Christian Fulton in the second round. I thought he was a great value pick. Maybe that's him and Mims are probably right there with the best value picks of the second round. Isaiah Wilson is a kind of a backup tackle, developmental tackle. I didn't mind that in the first round. You lost Jack Conklin. Dennis Kelly's a decent tackle, but he's also getting older, and again, he's up and down. Darrington Evans is a pick that was very interesting to me. I thought it was a little early, but it wasn't bad. I like him as a player, good agile running back that could serve as more of a pass-catching option. And again, the Titans can't just wear out Derrick Henry all the time either, because he's a power back. And again, that could wear and tear throughout the season. And then you saw in the AFC Championship game, you could see he was overworked. So the Titans, I think, did a nice job for the most part. And then two teams I think that did very well were the Colts and the Jaguars. The Colts I gave an A-. Again, another team that did not have a first-round pick. They traded it for DeForest Buckner. But I think they made the most of...
Speedy, just don't go through all the picks, because we have to get through the NFC as well. So
of course. So I think the Colts, considering that, they got Michael Pittman, they got Jonathan Taylor in the second round. Both are nice players for value. And I think Taylor will eventually start over Marlon Mack later in the season, too, because Marlon Mack is a phasey player. Two late picks I like were Jacob Eason and Desmond Patman as well. Eason, developmental quarterback, but again, Rivers is only there for 1 year, so maybe they can make that work. And Desmond Patman, a nice little slot guy who can end up making a difference as well. And one of my other A's was the Jacksonville Jaguars. I thought they did a very nice job in this draft. Two nice first-round picks with C.J. Henderson and Kayla Von Chason. That'll help out that defense. Laviska Shenault in the second round. Nice receiver. Again, he might take a little time to get going because of his injury as well. But again, good depth throughout, too. A lot of picks as well. Getting some depth on that defense. Shaq Quarterman I like in the fourth round, and Davon Hamilton in the third as well. So I think Jacksonville, another one that gets an A for me.
All right, so I'm just going to grade because we got to get through this, and we don't have time. As you know, it's 6:42, and we have a special guest, the Cleveland Cavaliers play-by-play announcer. So let's go through it. Houston Texans, I graded them a B. The Tennessee Titans, I graded them an A-. Indianapolis Colts, I graded them an A-. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, I graded them an A-.
You got an A-?
Yes.
All right.
So I've got three teams with A-s and one team with a B.
Well, the Texans really didn't have much to work with, so it's hard for them. All right, for the West, I had two A's in the West, too. I had the Chargers and the Broncos. I think both had phenomenal drafts. Chargers with Herbert, Broncos with Judy, but also a lot of good value picks throughout that. The Chiefs, I gave a B+. I think they had some good value. I love the pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round. And then there's the Raiders, who... You've heard me making fun of them all of the draft show on Thursday. They got my worst grade. They got a D. Besides Tanner Muse and Brian Edwards, there were no value picks for the Raiders. I'm sorry.
Kansas City, I gave them an A. I think Kansas City had one of the best, really the best drafts. They added offensive help. They added a running back, which they desperately needed at the end of the first round. Probably the best running back in this year's draft. I like what Kansas City did. I give them an A. Denver Broncos, I give them an A as well. The wide receiving core that they added, to me, Judy, who I think is one of the most underrated wide receivers we've seen in the last couple of years. This guy's an explosive player. What's his name again? Halmer or
KJ Hamler.
Hamler is another speedy guy, small guy that's going to give him speed on the outside and the inside. You can move him in the slot. Another value pick that they got in the second round. So he's another guy. So all in all, I gave Denver an A-. I thought they had a very good draft. Oakland Raiders, again, I wouldn't give them a D. I gave them a C-. I don't understand why they drafted Ruggs. They had a chance with Judy. They had a chance with CeeDee Lamb. Instead, they added Ruggs. Now, Ruggs is the fastest guy in this year's draft. Understandable. All in all, he is not Judy, and he's not Lamb. And just because of that, I graded them a C-.
Arnett was pretty bad, too.
The Los Angeles Chargers, I think they had a fairly good draft. They added a quarterback. Justin Herbert, I think, is the best quarterback in this year's draft. They added some defensive line help. They added some offensive players in this year's draft. I like what they did. So all in all, I gave the Los Angeles Chargers a B+.